Metaphor Fantasio is phenomenal, and one of the things that makes it so great is the archetype system, which gives the game a sizable amount of variety and customizability, as every archetype functions rather uniquely. Now in the series, we're going to go through and talk about all the different lineages and archetypes, covering their strengths, weaknesses, and even how they can be best used. And today, we're going to be talking about the most versatile lineage, the Masked Dancer. So the Masked Dancer is a lineage consisting of two different archetypes, the namesake Masked Dancer and then Persona Master. By default, they have a resistance to ice and a weakness to electric. However, unique to the Masked Dancer lineage is their ability to equip different masks based on the other archetypes, and upon equipping them, not only will they receive some of that archetype's abilities, but it will also change their resistances to mimic that of the mask. As for how you acquire these different masks, you can craft them at more using mask fragments that are dropped by enemies. Now, to balance the extra abilities provided by the different masks, both Masked Dancer and Persona Master have fewer actual abilities than any other archetype, only having a total of 4 each. Now, the titular Masked Dancer has Crimson Flame that deals heavy fire damage to all enemies, and Fertile Vortex that deals medium fire damage to a single enemy and has a chance to inflict burn, which is aided by their Art of Dance passive that increases the chance of inflicting status ailments. And their last ability is Masked Revelry, their lineage passive that restores 3 mana per turn at its weakest and around 8 mana at its strongest. As for their synthesis skills, they have Dance Macabre, which is a non-damaging AoE that has a high chance of one-shotting all enemies, and then there are the 3 different non-damaging dances that inflict one-time weaknesses to all enemies, with Hellfire granting fire, Ice Blue granting ice, and Sable Dart. But with that, we now move on to Persona Master. They only have access to 1 damaging ability in Rune's Flame Flower, which deals heavy fire damage to all enemies, while also removing any buffs they have. As for the remaining 3 abilities, they're all non-damaging dances that inflict one-time weaknesses to a single target, with Thunderhead granting electric, Vendure Wind, and Purge Light light. Then for their synthesis skills, they have the exact same as Masked Dancer with 1 powerful addition, Masquerade Charge, which greatly increases the party's physical attacks, but can only be used once per battle. But with that, we've covered all their abilities, so let's now move on to the pros and cons. Again, beginning with Masked Dancer and starting with their strengths, which mostly consists of 1 key aspect, that being the versatility granted by the different masks, as you're able to effectively make Masked Dancer whatever you need it to be without having to actually invest into other archetypes or using inherits, which only grants them more freedom when building their loadouts, and they're generally going to have access to abilities much earlier than they would otherwise. As for the weaknesses, since the masks use the accessory slot, many of the best accessories like Chain of Bonds or Utilitarian's Manual generally aren't going to see much use on Masked Dancer. Lastly, their synthesis pool may be the weakest of all the archetypes. But with that, we now move on to Persona Master and their strengths. Now, obviously, given that they're also able to use the masks, they share the same level of versatility as their predecessor. However, a unique strength to them is their Masquerade Charge synthesis, which is one of, if not the best physical buffing skill in the game, vastly increasing the damage of every physical-based party. As for their weaknesses, they essentially share the same as Masked Dancer, having an overall weak synthesis pool outside of charge, and their accessory slot will, in most cases, be used for their masks, with 1 notable exception, which we'll talk about shortly as we now move on to the builds, for which I have 3 to share. Now, given that Persona Master is just a direct upgrade to Masked Dancer, the builds can be used on either archetype except for the last one that is exclusive to Persona Master. But with that, let's get into our first build, which is an offensive magic skill spam build aimed at hitting enemy weaknesses. The mask you'll want to use is the Elementalist for the powerful magic passives it provides, and of course the elemental attacks. As for the inherits, you'll want to use Magic Circle from Mage, Back Boost from Warlord, Sense of Kinship from Berserker, and Long Range Boost from Dragoon or Hyper from Warlock. Now, while this build is aimed at hitting enemy weaknesses, if you're using Persona Master, you can use Thunderhead Dance to force an electric weakness. I'll also add that this isn't going to be the best magic build you'll have access to because of Summoner and Mage. However, since they tend to prefer using synthesis skills, this build allows you more options when building your party, plus it has better action economy until you unlock the Utilitarian's Manual. Anyways, moving on to our second and honestly more useful build, we have the full support build that puts basically all your utility on the Masked Dancer. The mask you want to use is the Trickster Mask for Vidyartha and Debilitate. As for inherits, it's really up to you what you want on your support character. Those some recommended inherits would be Dakunda in some form of healing from Healer, Dekaja from Faker, and formation skills from Commander, basically whatever you feel like you need on a utility character. Now, the reason that this build is so powerful is because of that Trickster Mask, because the chances are you're not going to have access to Trickster by the time you unlock Masked Dancer. However, getting their mask isn't that difficult, especially after the material vendor becomes available, meaning that you're able to get Vidyartha, possibly the best debuffing skill in the game, incredibly early. But with that, we move on to our final and likely strongest build, the Masquerade Charge build. So this build does exactly what you expect it to do. It focuses on using Masquerade Charge to turbo boost your physical damage dealers, and that's about it. Now, unlike the previous two builds, this one doesn't actually use a mask, since you do want that reduced synthesis action from the Utilitarian's manual. As for inherits, you can basically copy those that you used for the support build, though since you're not actually using the Trickster mask, you'll probably want to actually inherit Vidyartha from Trickster. But that's all I have left to share about the Dancer lineage. If you found this video helpful, please consider liking it and possibly subscribing to the channel. Also, if you know any other fun or powerful synergies that I didn't mention, share them in the comments, though do be mindful of spoilers. With that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.